All right, breaking down the entire season of The Real Housewives of Rhode Island, this BravoTV hit reality show. This season was good, unexpected. Who knew? You know, the franchise does have 20 years, 20 amazing years, starting in Orange County, you know, New York, New Jersey, Atlanta, Potomac, Miami, if Miami's not on pause, Salt Lake City, Dallas, DC, so many different shows. It's been a really good show, but there has been times where the shows feel like they're getting a little stuck, redundant, same or similar storylines. And then all of a sudden, you have this cast, Rhode Island, and in this reunion reunions usually are a little bit boring. The season will be good, but the reunion's boring. No, it was good. And it was even more that was brought to the table that you were like, I kind of can't wait for a season 2. Is this the crown jewel when it comes to Bravo TV's hit reality shows? All right, so just taking a quick minute to talk about Bravo TV's Real Housewives of Rhode Island. I think this show was so entertaining. Unbelievable, too. You know, it might have been one of those things where the show was assembled and it just made sense. I don't know if it was originally credited as a Real Housewives within the franchise. I know sometimes the network has a show that they're pushing together, and when they start to see the edits, they say, let's maybe change the name, such as with New York. It was originally called, I think it was called, Jill said it on the thing, Manhattan Moms or something. But then the show was so entertaining, and they were like, let's make this part of the Real Housewives. At that time, it was only about 3 different cities of the franchise. So something like that could have happened. But either way, I don't know who, how, what, where, but it happened. And Rhode Island has been so interesting. I always tell you, though I love the Northeastern everything, you know, I lived in New York on and off about 8 years from California, but I've always like really enjoyed the Northeastern vibe and whatnot. But I've only been to Rhode Island like maybe once or twice. I did get to go to Newport, so that was at least exciting. Newport, like this fantastic mansion for a wedding. It was the Rosecliff Mansion. This is the exact mansion that for the wedding that I went to. This was for, they did The Great Gatsby, not the Leonardo DiCaprio one, but the original Great Gatsby. They filmed it there, even though that's set in Long Island. Nonetheless, like that's my only experience of Rhode Island. So I didn't by any means watch Real Housewives of Rhode Island thinking, oh gosh, like I want to know about Rhode Island, and are we going to get to see Providence or Cranston or Newport, et cetera, et cetera. I just was like, let's see the dynamic of this cast. And a lot of times within the fan base, it's like, oh, unless the cast has storylines that are sort of assembled naturally and organically, when it turns to reality TV, especially these days, it doesn't come across really well, which is kind of a sentence that's said all the time. Vanderpump Rules, the original, really did well. Now, I'm one of the few people who likes Vanderpump Rules, the reboot, but it was not as much of those organic friendships as the original Vanderpump Rules, you know, Stassi and Katie and Kristen and everybody. But overall, they had existing storylines when a camera was or wasn't there, you know, when a show was or wasn't there. And I think that's maybe what made Rhode Island so good. I don't necessarily say that you need to have that to make a good show. I think compelling cast members is always number one. But in the case of Rhode Island, the fact that everyone knew who Joellen used to date, and Liz had stories, Alicia, and said, no, you can't say it that way because that never really happened. Parts of that made it really good. Now, there were other cast members that mixed in with this pre-existing friendships, and they did well too. I don't think Kelsey has really known the group that long. I gotta say, before we talk about the heavy hitters of this show, I don't know if I'm like, you know, one of few, but I actually do not think that, Ashley and Jared, I don't really think they're boring, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't think they're boring because, yes, did they get a lot of airtime on the show? Not so much. But I think every show, as much as you have your raw personalities, you know, your personalities that are going to say, but he did, ma, you know, Liz, but he did, ma, you know, you can have those rougher and more brash and more over-the-top characters like Liz, like Joellen. You always need maybe a mixture of something completely different. And I think Ashley did lean into her comedic, goofy, warm, And even the marketing of her being a influencer, which normally looks a little odd on a show, but it actually worked for her because you know that going into this, she already is working or kind of has jobs in that world coming from The Bachelor, as did her husband Jared. And he's from Rhode Island. So something to me just always kind of says, though Ashley probably got the most uninteresting award of the season because she didn't do a lot, I still say keep her, pay her more, and continue to make her the offbeat humor. Make her the not really the voice of reason of the show, but make her the funny one. Now, as for the show itself, like Rhode Island, I've been talking about it, Oh, before I say what I've been talking about, yes, randomlyronniejr.com for more is always good. And if you want to support, best way to do so, patreon.com/randomlyronniejr. As I always say, radio is what I started in like over 20 years ago, broadcast, and it's changed in a way, not always for the best way, but it's changed in a way so sometimes it makes it very difficult to like keep going and having the motivation. But sometimes it's fun to talk and have these experiences, so hopefully you can support that. That would be great. But going through the cast, yes, what I'm saying is I've already talked about the cast. This is me talking about like, wow, not only was the whole season wonderful, but the reunion was essentially the gift that keeps on giving. I don't need to go to each and every character because I've already done that for the most part. But I think more than anything, yes, Joellen, probably the star of the show. However, there was a lot. Now, when Gary was there, her husband, it made a lot of sense because it was basically saying Gary was like, I think what everyone's missing is that Joellen doesn't want to be made as a person who is lying about anything. And this kind of proves that, which I guess does make sense. And it does show a connection between Joellen and Gary as a couple, and I love that they have each other's back. The only problem with Joellen, as she continuously was having odds with Rula and Brian, is that at some point, if the other party, the relationship situation with Rula and Brian, having some past indiscretions and them trying to make it work is really their business. So I could understand Joellen saying, no, I'm trying to prove it, and here's my facts that support it, and she's got like a whole document, on her phone, look. It's cool and all, but it is kind of like, okay, at what point do you let it go as it relates to that is Rula's situation? And I gotta say, as a fan of the show from episode 1, it's only not so many episodes, but I remember liking Rula in a way that, it's easy to kind of be like, oh, let's laugh at her. She's kind of playing herself, and maybe she is, but she is really just trying to preserve her marriage, her family, and really at some point it's her own business. But what I always found fascinating about Rula is that she's everywhere else on point. So she's gorgeous. She's well in business. She seems like she runs like a good household and is on top of everything, gives great advice. Remember when she was talking to Alicia? She's really on fire and so confident. She reminds me of Larsa in a way, but the only thing that's kind of breaking that confidence is all the things that Brian has done to her. And I don't know if it's this thing where she's just trying to save face because, like, hey, Joellen, stay out of my business, or is it the one thing that she's shaky about? And something about that as a, dealing with it would probably be so difficult. Yes. But as a television character, obviously, Rula, Gary, these are real life situations. But as a televised storyline, which is all we see, there's something so fascinating about that. I mean, they really could essentially get through this hurdle and have one of the better marriages across every of the cast that was there. I will say one thing I liked about this season, this group, is there was a lot of connection with the husbands, boyfriends, and fiancés. I don't know what you would call Bill to Kelsey, because Kelsey, she moved it around a little bit. But see, I like Kelsey. I like the early in the season leaned into, what it was and where, where, who, and how certain things were provided to her, where it looks interesting. And I hope he doesn't have a negative thought process on how he watches it back, because Bill looked a little silly. I don't think Bill's silly, but I think he looked and appeared and was edited a little silly. That can cause a little bit of a friction between, let's say his friends and his family are like, oh, you look like Kelsey's, sort of playing you in a way. I don't think that, but I think it was certainly edited. There was a little moment where he was like giggling or something, and it was like really corny. And I'm just like, oh man, he's not going to be what he did naturally. And he's maybe never done a show like this and never had the edit. It might, cause a little bit of his disdain later on. But, Kelsey is going to move it around. I mean, I've talked about their songs that celebrate, certain women that move it around and get things done. And I think it's even playful and tongue-in-cheek. Like, is she that girl completely? I think she kind of tends to want to fight, but she's like right in the middle. She takes offense to it, but she also leans into it. So it's like, yeah, gold digging, whatever. I don't think she said it that way, but that's the effect. But then also she could get mad at Rosie. Now Rosie, okay, in the Rosie versus Kelsey on the reunion, I mean, I thought it was even and neck all season, but Rosie sat back in her chair. She looked like completely bothered, but not bothered in the way like we think of bothered. She was bothered like, do I have to talk about this pathetic Kelsey, is what it felt like. And there was something about it that made it really fun, and really like her digs landed on Kelsey in such a way. I mean, I like Kelsey, so it was like, see, I always say that I like shows like this where you have two cast members who are your favorites and they don't get along, because it makes for a good show. Because then you're necessarily not watching the show and getting like, yeah, and it's all or nothing. I always said, like, when Melissa and Dolores on New Jersey didn't get along, I loved it because I'm more of a Melissa Gorga fan, but I love Dolores too. So it's a great back and forth, because you like them both. So really, whoever wins the verbal sprawl, it's kind of fine, because you like them both. And that's what I was saying. Rosie and Kelsey all season, it was back and forth. Ooh, that was good. It made for a great show. But something about the reunion, Rosie was like, so she wasn't bothered. She was disinterested. She was laying back in her seat. She wasn't even like engaged. And she looked like, I mean, she really, unfortunately, being the more wordy person, because Rosie is, she comes from broadcast. I love broadcast. I worked in radio. I love all of that. Just like I love Stacey on Potomac. I always tend to like the broadcast, TV, radio folks. And Rosie, unfortunately, I just felt like Rosie was so quick with her words and Kelsey could not keep up. But I'm not hating on Kelsey. Okay, so the best part of the whole reunion is that it felt different. A lot of times in the reunion, it feels redundant. Specifically, think of a Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, which is a show that I think is overrated to begin with. I always say, how could we call it the crown jewel? Kyle's in the center, and she's never been interesting since season 1. Episode 1, frame 1, though has the power, which is probably why she's had the free ride all these seasons, because it's unbelievable. Season 1, episode 1, frame 1 of Beverly Hills, I was like, she's the least interesting, and yet she's still on the show. Incredible, right? Miracles do happen. But my point is, reunions don't usually have extra and newness and new excitement. It's usually the same stories being, drudged up over and over. But I don't know if they're doing reunions different at Bravo, because Bravo Network, maybe they had like some notes to kind of like step it up, because I was watching Southern Hospitality, which is Southern Charm's spinoff through Leva. Leva was the cast member, and then she basically had a Vanderpump Rules style show. It's in its 4th season. That reunion was like all these new, not storylines, but all these new issues and problems, some mending, sometimes they mend the fences of the friendships, and you're thinking they're absolutely not going to get along, and you're like, oh, they actually are. And I think Southern Hospitality was one of the more entertaining, it was a 2-part also, one of the more entertaining reunions. And then all of a sudden, so close to proximity of when that aired, Real Housewives of Rhode Island airs, and it's the same thing. It's like, a lot of chatter around Rula. Where was this Rula? And even if she wasn't really there throughout the season, and she set her boundaries at a certain way, fine. She when sat down next to Joellen, who Joellen, she will, talk your head off. We love Joellen as a little bit of a villain even, but Rula, like, am I crazy to think she stood her ground in that? Like, she completely shocked everyone, probably Andy as well. Liz was funny. It's appearing that Liz is maybe, I don't know, do we know the reasons? Do we want to know the reasons? Liz is not going to come back. I feel like Liz is not going to be done with this type of, I guess you would call it a job at this point, doing reality TV. I don't think she's done forever. I just feel like it's not a good time, which, again, we don't necessarily want to know why it's not a good time. Will she be missed? I think so. Will Dolores be missed? I think so. But I mean, there's so much to go off of. Alicia and the husband, I think they're actually a cute couple. Sometimes on the outside looking in, whether it's Andy, whether it's the producers, whether it's the other cast members, sometimes when asked the questions, it makes it look like Alicia's husband, or not husband, doesn't really have her best interest. But sometimes it's sort of a, what is that called when you lead the witness, kind of a way of questioning. And I would like to believe that he does have her best interest in heart. I would like to believe that actually, you know what, they are good. But there is that little small part where it's like, is Alicia being sort of played in that situation? She seems happy, and I've always had that term, I'm always wound real tight, which, means things get to me in a way. But I've always said that I've admired people who have that one philosophy or that terminology, which is ignorance is bliss. Not calling her ignorant, but ignorance is bliss. Like, Alicia is so happy. So whether he is I can't remember the name, whether he is sort of not having her best interest, she seems to be chill about it. So if they're happy, I feel like they're happy. But yeah, all in all, it was such a good season. I'm really impressed by it. The Real Housewives as a franchise does feel like it's been so redundant. Some of these storylines, some of these like recasting the whole cast and then putting shows on pause. Miami, it's like these shows aren't really working like they once did for a number of reasons. And then all of a sudden a fresh new idea comes, and it's by way of Rhode Island. So yeah, I would say it was a great season. I would say that I thought the reunion was entertaining to me. Like I enjoyed watching it. I was like, this is new. This feels fresh. It'll be interesting. Like with music, working in the music industry, the sophomore jinx. The first album is always easy to create because you're coming from basically your entire story of your life on how you want to present the music. Then you get that hit of success. It's not saying you change, but circumstances around you change. Let's say you're a musician and some of your deepest, most beautiful songs written come from a rougher time. Well, how do you do that for the second album when you're now eating caviar and on a fancy jet here, there, and everywhere? Nice clothes, access to, great friendships and parties and work and stuff and making tons of money. And it's like, it's harder to do. So I hope that this cast can kind of retain the success that they brought into season one. It feels like Joellen is going to be the one that's going to be the hardest to be friends with, because I think that even though Joellen was right, and Gary made that great point, that she's just trying to make sure her name is in the clear, because again, Brian did call the office. I'm not saying that I necessarily agree that Brian calling the office to Joellen's job really ruined her job. I think maybe it's just the time she was ready to leave anyway. I mean, now she's doing the show. This is now her job. But I guess it makes sense that he was saying, yes, the thing is she's just trying to clear her name and she doesn't like being thought of as a liar. But again, Joellen is doing she's too much. Joellen is doing too much. So I don't know going into the next season who's going to want to get real close with her. That's going to be Joellen's biggest problem. Though my favorite cast member, but then so is Rula, but then so is Rosie, but then so is Kelsey, then so is Alicia. I like them all, I don't know who is going to feel that comfortable. So what Joellen probably will need to do is just lean into her own stuff, because it feels like she's got so much to unpack with her own, she had the stuff with her mother that was a great scene, and I think maybe that's where she goes mostly. A season two, they'll be in production. A season two with her being Detective Joellen will be a bit challenging. Not for Joellen. She could do it. She could do it in her sleep. But I think it'll be tough because I don't know who, unless it's like Ashley, like, you know, because she's like, she doesn't have a lot of grit. You know, she's more, like I say, the comic relief of the show. Who's going to really hang with her? Maybe it'll be Ashley really gets close to Joellen. Ashley sort of mediates the situation, calms her down a lot. Because, yeah, Joellen's probably going to be up in arms about somebody. Here's who I think this, if we're going to make a show, this is just my throw out. I think Rosie and Joellen, wherever that's at, they, especially losing Liz. Now it's like sort of, it's just a show, it's real life and all that, but it is a show, and it is which cast is going to be the lead, who's going to be in the middle, you know, who's going to sit next to Andy, all these unimportant things that are like really important. I think Rosie, I don't know if I was Rosie, and Rosie's very smart because she's done television. Again, I always give credit to that. I know it's my bias from working in the business too, but I always say, you know, you maximize the opportunity, and Rosie will do that. And I think that Rosie and Joellen either need to be besties next season, or Rosie and Joellen, there's got to be something. But Rosie is sharper than I thought. At the beginning, I didn't think Rosie had all what she had. I really did not. I actually put her in the category more of Ashley, or Alicia. You know, they're funny, they're comic relief, they're lighthearted for the show. Rosie has all that too, and she's, you know, dresses in the garb of like a Legally Blonde, and you know, this she's funny. She's like, I'm a television reporter. I was a television reporter, and my audience is, you know, people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Like, she's really cute in that way. But Rosie might be the smartest on that show, with an exception of Rula, because I love Rula. But again, that makes it hard because you can't say Rula's so smart because she's dealing with the stuff with Brian. But I also think that's what makes it so amazing. I wonder which, you know, you can't have favorites. I wonder, who do you think Andy Cohen's favorite cast member is? I think he likes Rula better than everybody. But then again, that's what I think. I like, I'm not saying Joellen's not the star because she is. I'm not saying Rosie's not the star because she is. I'm not saying Alicia's not the star because she is. Her and her crackers. She loves her crackers. She can't drive. But I really feel like we all collectively think Rula is the star of the show. And here's why. She's the star of the show because with Rula in the mix, things get created, things happen, and she doesn't really, I don't know, I guess usually when I do these episodes, all 1,500, please go like, comment, and subscribe. I always have these supporting comments behind, and then it's like I'm a little winded, you know, I talk so long, which I like, but I don't think people like anymore, which sucks. But I always give my, here's why, I'm just going to say, Rula, when Rula is in the room, Rula makes the show in some type of way. Okay? That's what I think. So I don't know. Do you think Andy's favorite is Rula? Andy has to have a favorite. You know, we're not supposed to have favorites, right? But I bet you Andy has a favorite. And I think he'd probably say it's Rula. Or I think maybe it could be probably Alicia. Because Alicia's like, she's got the most funny, not necessarily one-liners, but she's the warmest of the show. She's the one that had the, you know, it's summertime in Rhode Island this, Rhode Island that. She's got the aunts. I love the aunts. Give us more of her aunts that from in Cranston. When they complain, they're like, oh, she lives way over there, and it's like 20-minute drive. There's something that makes her very paramount to the show in a way that, like Kelsey, you could have cast Kelsey on, you know, Miami, or you could have cast Rosie on, you know, any of the other shows. There's something that's very Alicia makes sense for Rhode Island, in my opinion. I don't know. Great season. Was it a 5 stars? And who is the star of the show? These are the questions we're asking. Who was the star of the Real Housewives of Rhode Island breakout, unexpected season 1 success? And how does it stack up to all the other shows within the franchise. Orange County, New York, Miami, Potomac, DC. I always say DC, it only had one season, but still. Salt Lake City, Dallas, all that stuff. How did it stack up? I liked it. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe, and get on my Patreon. Patreon.com/randomlyronnie Jr. Yeah, help me out a little.
Hey, Ronnie Jr.